you can have the greatest technology ever. You can have all the plans set up. All the commanders can have the best intentions, but if they're hamstrung by a commander's intent or a bad mission, that makes great
Bad
drama.
ROE.
Bad ROE. Yeah, I mean, that's drama right there. That's what creates drama for soldiers when they're trying to do the right thing or to accomplish their mission within the constraints of an ROE that doesn't make sense to them, or is not the ground truth, or is trying to reach a political goal that is at odds with actually holding the territory.
Yeah, any goal that isn't total victory is at odds with
Right.
the soldier on the ground.
Troopers fall through an endless sky. Military sound and science fiction contest. We enter the system on fire. Military sound and science fiction contest. Untold stories every Wednesday. Military sound and fiction contest.
Welcome to the Military Science Fiction Podcast. We are four veterans who are crazy enough to become writers, and we're here to talk about what makes great military SF, the greatest niche within a niche of any fiction. More niche than the ATF. Did I say ATF last time? What other niche?
I don't think so.
ATFE.
I was waiting to see what you came up with this time.
Right.
It's new and improved.
More niche
ATFE
than
now.
More niche than the alcohol, tobacco, and explosives arm of the
Right.
ATF.
the Postal Inspector Service.
Mhm.
On board is Rick Partlow, author of more than 60 novels. In fact, I think he's at 70 now, because he passed 69, including Contact Front and the Drop Trooper series. Jeffrey H. Haskell, author of the Grimm's War series, as well as the Wraith and Arsenal superhero series. Jeff Hayes, author of the Valor series. And
Jeff Hayes. Who's Jeff Hayes?
Did I say Jeff Hayes? Josh
That's
Hayes.
my pseudonym.
Too many J's.
Don't
man.
put my real name out there.
Too many J's. And operations manager and head of thriller acquisition for Aethon Books. And I am James S. Aaron, author of the Aeon 14 Sentience Wars and Galactic Law series. Between the four of
And
us,
soon to be other sci-fi series.
soon to
if
be
we're
other
lucky.
sci-fi series. Yes. Universe willing. So between the four of us,
I
Yeah.
think we need to call him Josh Purple Haze.
Purple
Mm.
Haze.
It's actually pronounced Yeshua Hayes. If you want to maybe pronounce it correctly next time.
All right. What are your
I'll
pronouns?
work on that. I'll get my my throat, my glottals going.
Yeshua.
Joshua. All right, where did I
Wait,
go?
we are three J's and an R, aren't we?
We are. Yeah.
You were the odd man out. Rick. One of these does not belong.
This is the intro to break all
leaving now.
intros. Join our Discord and tell us how much you love us. Okay. Today we're talking about, well, I just lost my mental track. So who wants to talk about what we're talking
Today
about?
we're talking about invading a planet, the resources required to do it, and how it escalates over time. So we're going to start with proposing an invasion of a civilized planet using technology level similar to what we all write in our books, which means no, neutron bomb that immediately wipes out all life on the planet and we just walk in. Basically you got to land troops, you got to control the orbit. And we're going to go from a place of how can we take this planet and maintain the civilian population all the way through, okay, we're done with these people now, and it's just time to drop some stuff on them. They've left around, now it's time for them to find out. Does that sound about right?
I think that sounds
I think
about
that's right.
Yep.
I think that's right.
We were kind of starting with an Avatar situation, I think, where do we defoliate the planet or, well, I don't know, but that's all part of that progression. So I think that we started with, like, you have to, like, even in what Jeff just explained, you have to start with some kind of ground rules, because you're right. Like, coming at a planet, you're going to see people coming from, and that also gets, like, what level of technology do the people on the planet have? Can they see someone coming from far away? Like, we've talked about portals or faster than light previously, but any entry point into the system, if they're sufficiently advanced or of the same technology level, they'll be able to see folks coming into the system. And if they realistically, and if they're not going to see that, you should account for it in some way. And so you can almost start with that reconnaissance, that what is the information flow coming to the planet, and then how are the attackers and the defenders considering that as you kind of bring these two forces together. Does that
I
sound
think if
like
you're starting it from perspective of like there is like a low level or low tech civilization on the planet, a la Avatar, or as I like to call it, Dances with Wolves in Space.
Fern Gully in space.
Ferngully in space.
Ferngully and Pocahontas meet the
Pocahontas in space. Yeah, I mean they're all the same story, right? These poor hapless natives can't get along on their own until a white guy comes along and saves them all, right? Yeah, which is stupid because those poor hapless natives could bench press a truck, and so like they apparently weren't hapless at all. But so I think if you're starting with a situation where you have like a relatively human-like species on a planet and they're not of a sufficient tech level to have infrastructure or power or electricity or whatever, they're basically just natives. And you're assuming that we're coming in with spaceships and troops and we want to control a populated part of this planet. I know a lot of people, their first thought is like, well, they're natives, what are they going to do? Well, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of examples in history, like the Zulu, beyond just, the American West, where a low-tech native population held a more technologically advanced civilization at bay, not permanently, obviously, but for a long time, to the point where, three of us were in the army, and one of us served in an auxiliary force that is somewhat like a military. To the point where
It's not Coast Guard, damn it.
Whenever we were doing something crazy, we yelled two things. We either yelled "Remember the Alamo" for some reason, or we yelled Geronimo. And I know every time we jumped out of airplanes, it was Geronimo. And that's kind of tells you the reverence.
I yelled, "Why the hell am I jumping out of this airplane?
Why the hell am I jumping out of a perfectly good airplane?"
And I was like, why are they jumping out of my airplane?
Yeah. Without a parachute. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Without a parachute?
But I mean, like it was low enough over water. Yeah, sure. Geronimo had made such an impact on the U.S. Army that 150 years later, they're still yelling his name as a war cry. So I think that should tell you a little bit about, or what's that? Conan in the Savannah. What's the guy who led the Zulu?
Shaka Zulu or
Shaka Zulu. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they still make movies and songs about him, and it's hundreds of years later. So clearly, a low-tech native force can be a threat. So I think the first mistake of any military force moving into an area could possibly make, which would be to underestimate the enemy and say, oh, they're not a threat because they have bows and arrows, or they're not a threat because they don't have electron guns or whatever.
Well, they're still going to be battling logistics, terrain, time, what the mission is. We kind of talked about, like, and the natives, I think, as they come, like, you're right, that's the first thing often these people make, is thinking natives or folks of lower tech are stupid. They're not stupid, they just have lower tech, and so they're going to look immediately for ways they can exploit whatever advantage they have, be it understanding the terrain, watching how the enemy operates. In Afghanistan, that's one of the things that just having a kid out herding sheep that watched drones all day long, and it's pretty difficult to it becomes very clear quickly what the drones are doing. And if you see one drone all the time and nothing happens, but then you see three drones and somebody gets killed, okay, now we've got a really actionable intelligence. And so those are things to consider, I think. You're right, like, just because they're lower tech certainly doesn't mean it's not going to be a hard fight. And a lot of times that hubris of coming in, I think that's a place to start. If you've got I mean, it's kind of a trope at this point, I guess, but if you've got a commander that thinks this is going to be a cakewalk and they learn their lesson.
And it's a dumb trope. And it's absolutely not one you should implement in your book without a lot of care and thought into it, because it's the most obvious thing you could possibly do.
I
It
think
would
when
be
talking about, especially in the far future, when you're talking about, well, in military sci-fi that we're discussing, like what's the reason you're invading the planet? Like, why are you going there? And that can affect how you approach it. If you're going to harvest resources, and obviously you're not going to want to nuke the planet, and shower it in radiation
just to be
and
sure.
biological and chemical agents, right? If you're going for like a specific thing, I don't know, the fountain of youth. If there's something there that you're going for, you need to be extremely careful about how you approach it. And it's apart from going against a low tech civilization, if you're going against a civilization that's on par with your tech, it presents a lot of different challenges on top of them knowing the terrain and the location and everything else, because you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. And especially if you're not wanting to destroy the resources that you're coming to harvest. um, you know, uh, 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 like Starship Troopers, the movie. I'll reference that because I haven't read the book, and it's kind of a tongue in cheek story, but you're looking at the drop ships coming down with all the ships, and the bugs are shooting up these whatever poop rockets that are blowing up the drop ships,
Rockets.
and they never get in, how many of them get blown up on the way down and never have a chance to touch down and engage. um Look at how difficult it is to invade a modern day country here on Earth, and then compound that by you're traveling through atmosphere and orbital defenses or whatever you have. There's just a lot of things to take into account when you're starting out a campaign like that.
I think the biggest reason if you look at like the history of warfare, like specifically the last couple hundred years, the biggest reason to take a place that has like a native population would be is for base. Like,
For
did
sure.
you guys read about the South Pacific, how they'd build airfields and radio towers, and they would use that for resupply? And then what they would find was that the natives were building their own versions of airfields and radio towers, and they would use coconuts as things, and then they would
Yeah.
like basically pray for the United States to bring in supplies to them
Cargo cult.
because they saw it happen. So I think the biggest reason for that would be is you need a place for a base. You need a ground force base. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. I mean, you'd think like, oh, you got fast and light or whatever. Why would you need a base? Well, I don't know if you guys remember how much it sucked to be deployed and not have a place to stretch your legs.
And you need to be able to say all your base are belong to us.
Thank you for that contribution, Rick. That was great.
Well, but you need logistical things. You need water. You need air. You need
Well, technically, you could get water and air from asteroids.
Yeah, but there is like
but
there is like a
right,
psychological
though.
effect of being on a planet.
Yeah, that was going to say psychologically, even if you built floating cities for R&R, it's not the same. People
Right.
want to be able to walk in real gravity and breathe real air.
Well, and even if you can get water and air from asteroids, it could be easier and more efficient to just harvest it if you've got it there, and you don't have to bring equipment to mine the asteroids or.
What it also could
harvest
be is more
anything.
secure.
I
Because
think
if
if
you build a space station to house your troops, that's an awfully big target.
For sure.
I think if you were looking at building a base on a planet that was populated by natives, and your goal was to build a logistics waypoint, essentially, and a place for your troops to have R&R and things like that, I think the best thing you could do would be to clear off the top of a mountain, like go up about 2,000 feet, level off the top of a big mountain with a nuke, a clean nuke, and build a base there. And because then you would have a situation where, like, okay, the natives can come and they can come and try and get to you, but they have to go up the mountain and do it. And you've got this big flat open area to build on that is relatively seismically stable because you just cleared off a mountain to do it. I mean, to me, that would be the thing that would make sense. Now, for some reason, you need the place that the natives were living in. You're no longer looking to build a base, you're looking to harvest resources. And now you're the bad guys, and I don't write bad guys, so I'll leave that to you guys to figure out how to do.
Well, I mean, you're taking it from the point of view of the invader, but what about if they're invading your planet? And
The natives without technology.
no, like the aliens, the bad guys, are invading your planet, and you either have to keep them from landing, or afterwards you have to take it back again.
Sure.
Well, I
Taking-
think looking
taking
at
a
it from
planet-
both perspectives is the
Yeah.
best way to approach writing it. That way you can point and counterpoint your own kind of progress through the plot and figure out, where are the choke points that need to be controlled? Where are the important landmarks and waypoints that you need to dominate in order to win?
And we're also assuming that like you're landing on a planet to make a base because you need a place for your troops to R&R. We're assuming that the natives, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone, but that may not be the case. They may decide because you're an alien devil that you have to be destroyed because, as we all know, the noble savage thing is just a trope. They were as awful and evil and horrible as anybody else who lived at the time. There was no such thing as the righteous noble savage who was just out there living their best life. No, they were slaughtering each other in droves, just like everybody else on the planet.
They were people.
So they're people. Yeah,
Well,
they're
Sam-
people.
But
And they're
Sam
good versions,
Peckinpah,
and they're
Sam
bad
Peckinpah
versions.
said, the myth of the noble savage is bull. People were born to survive.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Comanche. I mean, everybody was afraid of the Comanche because of what they would do to their prisoners. So maybe you're on a situation where we built this base on this planet. It's in a reasonably defensible area. We have no interest in attacking the natives, yet we're being constantly sieged by the natives. At what point do you say, well, enough of this crap? As Samuel L. Jackson said in what was that movie where he was defending
Enough
the
of the
embassy?
MFing snakes on this MFing plane.
No, wrong one. He's all like, gosh, what did he say? It was so good. They're on top of that embassy and they're taking fire. Waste the mother,
Oh yeah,
and
rules of
all
engagement.
the Marines pop up and
Rules
open
of
fire.
engagement.
Yeah, rules
I
of
like that
engagement.
now.
Yeah, perfect name for the movie since that's what we're talking about. So, at what point, when you're defending your base, do you just like enough is enough? We've lost soldiers. We're losing troops. We haven't done anything to these people other than just be here. At what point do you say waste the mothers?
I think the people at the base would say that sooner than later, but the higher ups might have another opinion. You know how
Right.
rules of engagement
Well,
come
and it
from
would be the
above.
higher ups, right, who would have to make that decision. Because if you did it at the base level, they would probably face charges like they did during Desert Storm.
I don't know. When I think of this, I don't think of trying to conquer, technologically primitive natives. I was thinking more of one technological civilization fighting another. I mean, like you said, the people who come in and take what the natives already have sounds more like a, cynical, power hungry, imperialist type of government, which
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'd be writing from the other side of that if I was writing the book. So
Yeah.
I'd really be interested in how to conquer the natives. But I would think given what we've experienced, a nation or government or whatever that would send a force to a already inhabited planet to occupy part of it without the permission of the natives probably would have less patience with them, than what we're thinking of right now. But from our point of view, probably would wipe them out at the earliest provocation.
No, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that happening. I can also see it going the other way, which is like, you keep like I've watched some stuff. I wasn't in Afghanistan, but I watched some stuff where, the officers in charge were just ordered to appease, to the point where you were paying the bad guys one day that you would be shooting the next, and so I can kind of see it going either way. I think the best thing to do would be to do your very best to just have no contact at all and just use whatever technology you have to keep them at bay, without, obviously invading their land or taking their resources, and that would require intelligence and reconnaissance. But as Rick said, our idea was to evolve this idea as we went along. So now let's switch it up to, we're moving into a planet that is of a reasonably same technology level. Why would we be there? What are we doing? Are we at war with them? Are we trying to take the planet as a whole? Are we trying to take a portion of the planet? What's the plan there?
I think we should come up with reasons why you would want to take a planet intact
Right.
in an interstellar war. Because I can think of several. They may not all apply, they may be rare, but one thing, it may be that habitable planets are very rare,
Mhm.
and you don't want to risk, contaminating one, and you're trying to take it because you claimed it and the enemy took it from you without, came across the neutral zone or whatever, or you had a colony there and they took it, or they're using it as a base to attack you from.
I mean, if it's not habitable, why are you even fighting over it? I mean,
if they're using it as a base to attack you from, you might.
Well, yeah.
destroy
I mean,
it.
but it'd be like, if you're not worried about
Yeah.
it being habitable,
Yeah, but I'm
get a
saying
couple
if
asteroids go up to sea and
habitable planets are rare and very, very valuable, that'd be
yes,
a reason to take it intact and
yeah, absolutely.
put troops on the ground.
And then you
Well, I
and
think so
then you
too.
come into limiting.
Like
Go ahead, Josh.
in terms of what I usually envision when I think about this stuff, especially in my universes, is that if humans are there, it's habitable for the most part, right? Either they've figured out a way to sustain life, or it is just an Earth-like planet, which is usually what I go with because it's the easiest and most readily identifiable and understood by the reader. And there are other habitation places like in asteroid fields, like Rick has mentioned before. But if we're talking about a planet specifically, I usually just go from the standpoint of that it's an Earth-like planet, and for reasons why a lot of the time that I have kind of spent wargaming this out, it's kind of very simple. Like Rick mentioned, getting a planet back that's been invaded by an enemy. I've got in weaponized. I've got a foreign power that is kind of expanding their territory, and they're occupying or annexing planets and colonies, and they're kind of expansionist expansion outward from the core worlds. And to get those planets back, you've obviously got to go to war with them. But now you're looking at taking a planet back, but also addressing like individual like hard points on the planet, like military bases that the enemy has set up, defensive platforms, offensive platforms, that kind of thing. And so in an invasion like that, you're going to have kind of like in modern, nation versus nation, you've got multiple fronts and you've got multiple things going on simultaneously, where you've got to take
You got to take
defensive
orbit and you got to
platforms.
control orbit at the same time.
100%, yeah.
Mhm.
And so
And
it
not
becomes
just
kind
an orbit is not just like, I got to control the coast of California. I've got to
right.
control everything from 100 kilometers up to 100,000 kilometers up. It's orbit's a big place.
And then that aspect, I think of, orbital defenses, like having, star bases or war bases that are orbiting. Do we blow them up, or are they have they been taken over by the enemy? Was it a mining platform that got turned into a defensive platform, and now we can't
You have
just
to put
destroy
troops
it
on it
because
and take it
yeah,
back.
100%. Yeah, you've got to
Mhm.
put
That's a
troops
good
on
idea.
that. You've got to have, maybe 0G combat. You've got to have zero atmosphere combat. You've got to take all that kind of stuff into account. I think that presents, Rick has written a World War Mars series, and I know Drop Trooper takes place in many different environments. But if you're writing a story and part of your story involves taking back a planet, I think it would be um, detrimental to the author and to the story to make that be just a one-off, one chapter, and we went and took the planet, because there's so many things that are involved in taking a planet, one, without killing everybody, and two, taking it and being able to hold it.
Well, right
be-
now I'm writing Grimm's War 6 and 7 are linked. So 6 was a grim decision, and 7 is traditions of courage, and it's all about, and because this is this very subject, which was there's this planet called Cordoba, this corporation called the Guild invaded it for resources, and it became bigger than one book. So I had to break it into two because I couldn't just do like they invaded, we fought them back, blah blah blah. It just seemed
Right.
like it needed to be a much bigger story than that. And especially the politics leading up to the invasion
Right.
and the setup of the planet and who those people were. Because if you're like coming at it from the place of you're invading the planet, you need to have a reason why people care about you invading a planet. Like Rick did an excellent story where they were taking back one of his drop trooper books, I forget which one, 3 or 4. They're taking back a planet that had previously been theirs, and the enemy had like kept a bunch of or not slaves, but prisoners, and starved them, and it was awful. And they were like, but it was like it had been like a resort plan or something, because there was like hunting retreats that they were trying to, but they're all the buildings were booby trapped, and it was all this stuff. So there was a reason for his troops to be invading and a reason for you to care about them. And in this essence, I had to build up a reason why you wanted the Alliance, which is my good guys, to defend this planet that wasn't a member from this greedy invading corporation that's basically EA if it was left unchecked for 1,000 years.
Is that the ship from
And
Star Blazers behind you, Jeff?
yes, it is. It is the battleship Yamato
Oh, nice.
by an amazing artist named Jean Zhang, who I'm always trying to get work for. I met him at Dragon. You can see that it's signed.
I was going to say, didn't you
Um,
get that at Dragon Con?
Yeah, and he is absolutely incredible artist. I think he's actually might be working with Athon a little bit too, so I'm excited to see what he does. Because Steve fell in love with his work too. Steve Bollier, our publisher, he fell in love with his work. So you got to have a reason why people care about what your troops are doing. And so that was for me, a grim decision was about building up why you should care about these people on this planet, even though ultimately some of them are bad. And then why you should root for the book 7 is why you should root for the freedom of this planet and fighting this big corporate battle. So the motivations behind everything is really important.
I think in terms of making the reader care about what's going on, a lot of that can be super granular too. When you talk about in a grand scale, we cared about what happened during World War II, for instance, but you watch Band of Brothers and you care way more about what happened to that small company. And not that you didn't care about the millions of other men that lost their lives during the war, but you were much more personally connected. And so if you've got a big scale battle like that, sometimes you can get lost in the weeds a little bit by, going from major conflict to major battle to major engagement or whatever. And then the reader kind of loses connection with the people that you're following the events through. And that's what I'm saying. Like if you have multiple engagement areas, that can get really kind of complicated to write if you're not focused on it. I just finished
It
reading
does, yeah. And you got to have characters in those engagement zones that people
Right.
care about.
Well, your
for
scope,
sure.
and that's one thing we talk about, the whole, like the idea of an entire planet, but it's something to think
Yeah.
through. Like, are we going to have characters at each of these very, important places to be able to tell this whole story? And if you're doing a series or if you're going to do it within a book, like you actually don't have a lot of real estate to show these different pieces of it, right? And I think the biggest thing people often forget with a planet is it's huge. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of, unless we're identifying key terrain or key cities or like key resource that we're going to take, and somehow that's a magic
How
button.
populated is it?
Yeah,
It takes a long time for a planet to build up to a population of billions.
right.
It took us 120 years to go from 1 billion to 7 or 8 billion or whatever we're at now. But it took us
I just
2,000 years almost to go from 500,000 to a billion. Obviously, the more people you have, the faster the population grows. But how many cities are there? How many major cities are there? How many continents are they
That's
dispersed upon?
that's a great question. And a key question is this like the home world of your enemy, or is this like a outpost or colony you're taking. I mean, if it's an outpost, it may be one city
Yeah.
or one major population center you have to take.
Or it might be a colony that's like 100 years old and only has one or two cities,
Yeah.
one or two big cities, and then several smaller
And then you have
25,
to
30,000
look and
people
say, if I take this biggest city, are they going to? It depends what the enemy does, because if they concentrate their forces in one city to do battle, to do battle like one last time in that one place, then you can throw everything you have there. If they take the commando route and disperse into the woods, well, you're looking at years of fighting, maybe.
I just finished reading Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rucchio, and when he talk about scale and making somebody care about it, he's got a sequence that takes up what do you think, James, about 20-30% of the end of the book, where they're attacking this it's a ship, but it's kind of a world ship. It's a
like Rama?
huge place. It's called Vorgosos, and it's basically like a moon, right?
Yeah, moon.
Yeah, but he calls it a planet. And the entire series is written in first person, and this engagement on this moon or world is huge. It's massive, and there was no way that, especially in first person, that he could show everything that was happening. And so while we're following the main character going through kind of these major points of the engagement, you're also getting basically what amounts to radio traffic from everybody else,
Right.
so that we know what's happening. So there's an orbital engagement going on with huge fleets of ships that we don't see, but we know it's happening because he's got communication with some of the people, and then that communication gets cut off, and then we're stuck on the planet, and we go through a whole bunch of events. But then as he's coming out of kind of a very enclosed area, and they start going through the city in mass, you see the ramifications of this battle, where there's just destruction and death all over the place. And so we know as readers, this has been going on the whole time while these other people have been dealing with this small situation. It was very interesting because on the scale that he writes, it's massive. It's like an epic fantasy scale, but he's able to condense what you're reading to a very personal thing, while also showing, look, all of this other stuff is going on, and you don't feel, as a reader, I didn't feel that I missed out on anything, because of the way that it was presented, kind of in little pieces, little conversations, little, like a scout or someone would run up to the main group and say, hey, we've engaged these people over here, and there's 100 people coming through the gates over here or something. There's a very interesting way to present that massive engagement on a scale that the reader can comprehend, because you start talking about tens of thousands of people fighting tens of thousands of enemies, and that quickly becomes unintelligible to the reader in terms of just understanding what's happening.
Right.
Yeah,
Rick
you have
did
to
something
narrow-
like that
narrow
in
your
Drop
scope.
Trooper with the nose cams on the ships. Rick, your guy, you would tap into the nose cams when you're doing your drops.
Since it's first person and he's a grunt, I had to show what was going on in orbit somehow. So as he becomes, a senior NCO and an officer, he gets access to the ship's tactical feed, and
That was awesome.
what?
If you're listening, Jeff's camera just fell over, and it was pretty.
that's why.
I'm on my laptop
I thought he was
downstairs and I
adjusting it.
accidentally knocked it over.
Yeah.
But he gets access to the tactical feed from the ship, so he's watching what's happening, and he hates doing it because there's nothing he can do about
Right.
that battle. He's just sitting there. But he also the fact that he knows he can do it means that if he doesn't do it, that he feels like, I need to be seeing what's going on. So
Well, and we started off, we were complaining about, or we were talking about like differences in, like say, Gulf War #1 with Schwarzkopf massing, huge amounts of U.S. forces or coalition forces in Kuwait. And then during, Iraqi freedom, when the argument, Shinseki made the argument that we needed something like 70,000 troops to take Iraq, and Rumsfeld shut him down and said, no, we're going to do it with whatever it was, 20,000. The and that transition where, especially the war room with, the George Bush war room with Rumsfeld, and then to Obama, they had the ability to watch combat on the ground and how that changed. Like, they had the scope, but they didn't have the detail necessarily, and that information flow. There's a
Or
lot
the
of stuff.
knowledge
Yeah, or the knowledge. And
in
there's
order to fight the war, because I mean, was Musashi wrote Legend of the Five Rings. Sun Tzu wrote his book thousands of years ago, and they all say the same thing. You have overwhelming forces if you want to attack defenders.
right.
And then you got a civilian in Rumsfeld who's all like, well, we've got planes and we've got this and we've got that. We don't need a lot of boots on the ground. And like, I'm all for limiting casualties to infantry, obviously. But you cause casualties when you don't put in enough troops.
Well, honestly, I mean, we had enough troops for the invasion. It was
Right.
it was the occupation we didn't have enough troops
Right.
for.
Exactly.
I mean,
And that's
the
what,
invasion was a complete success, but then what do you do now? And
Right.
I really think that it wasn't the lack of numbers that made a difference. It was the lack of a plan for how
That's
to
what I was just
handle
gonna
the
say.
occupation.
I mean, we had no good plan for Iraq, which, looking back, hindsight's 2020,
Afghanistan.
but I remember,
We
I remember
we
being
should have
part of,
we should have kept the army in
Yeah.
place and used them to maintain order, which was the
But-
biggest mistake, I think.
that,
Well, they were so
the one
busy
last thing I
trying
was
to
going
win
to
hearts
say
and
is,
minds, you know.
they withheld decisions. Like, they took decision-making power away from the commanders on the ground, which had all kinds of cascading effects across, like, even the local population. When, you could see at the end of Afghanistan and global war on terror, when drones became, we wanted to pull out ground troops, and drones became our primary way to, attack people in the country. And all of these, because we had no clear goals, those, they just hated us more and more and more over time. But these are all things I think you can have the greatest technology ever. You can have all the plans set up. All the commanders can have the best intentions, but if they're hamstrung by a commander's intent or a bad mission, that makes great
Bad
drama.
ROE.
Bad ROE. Yeah, I mean, that's drama right there. That's what creates drama for soldiers when they're trying to do the right thing or to accomplish their mission within the constraints of an ROE that doesn't make sense to them, or is not the ground truth, or is trying to enact, reach a political goal that is at odds with actually holding the territory.
Yeah,
Uh,
any goal that isn't total victory is at odds with
Right.
the soldier on the ground, because like, if you walk into a village and you're not allowed to shoot at people, even if they're shooting at you, which at one point was the ROE in the second war of Desert Storm or Iraqi freedom,
right.
then what are you even doing there? Who's making the decision that you're there, that you basically are there as a target and nothing else? And I know that demoralized a lot of soldiers.
In an interstellar situation, I think how closely we adhere to the ROEs and how quickly we throw it out the window
Yeah.
will depend a lot on how fast our communications are. Because if communications only go as fast as the next ship to come in, well, then whoever's in charge in that system is going to say, the hell with it.
They're in charge of the system.
Yeah, and I'm gonna do what I have to do to win this battle, whether or not I have to wind up killing a bunch of enemies.
And
I can't
facing the
remember-
consequences down the road. Yeah, I'm with Grimm's War. That's how it is, because they don't have FTLC. They just have ship packets. So they send a message and it goes to a ship, and the ship goes to the next system and sends that message on, and so on and so forth. So oftentimes Jacob finds himself in a position where he is the highest ranking authority in the system, and he has to make decisions based on what he believes is best for the people of the system. And sometimes that means he stands in front of a review board and has to explain himself as to, well, why did you blow up the ship? Or why did you do this? Or why did you do that? And, by people who weren't there, who weren't experiencing the situation and have no knowledge of the local area, who look at it almost like a computer. So, I mean, that's like James is saying, that's drama. That
can't
adds
remember
tension to
which,
a story.
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
can't
Jim.
remember which book it was, but the movie that I'm thinking of that kind of touches on this is 1917.
Yeah.
When
Oh, I haven't
they
seen
get
that yet, but
this.
I want to.
Oh, it's such a great movie. When they get this information that is basically don't attack because you're going to get just trounced, and you have to get this information to the general, and he gets there just as the attack is kicking off. But if you have that kind of communication lag, the concept that I was thinking about is the two nations are at war, one nation surrenders, but somewhere these two people are fighting, and they're continuing the fight after the surrender is done, and the team that surrenders, they get wiped out by the other team. And I want to say that was in a book or a movie that I have read, but I can't think of what it is. And how does that affect, you know, geopolitical stuff? If
Oh yeah,
they've
and that's
already
heartbreaking
surrendered,
too, because the war is over.
the
Right.
war's
These
over,
guys don't know it. Yeah.
right, and you go in and you just completely obliterate a military base, or like a planet that we're talking about, and they've done that.
Well,
in
the battle of New Orleans, wasn't that actually after the end of the War of 1812, technically?
Oh, I don't know. I
It
don't know.
was. And the funny thing about that battle was both sides claimed victory.
Well, the
Nice.
British lost.
Well, I know,
Well,
but we have a song about how we won, and they have a song about how they won. It's hilarious.
I mean, just from any objective standard, they lost the battle, but it didn't really matter because the war had ended already.
yeah.
Gallipoli,
and
right? Is that how you
how
say it?
how
Gallipoli with
devastating would that
Muggeson?
What'd you
Is
how
say?
something like
devastating
that.
would that be to the people that won? That
Right.
Yeah.
with I think with most soldiers, they're just there for the guy beside them, right? And so they're not going out with the intent and excitement of, oh yeah, we're gonna kill a whole bunch of people. But this overwhelming thing, and you're gonna have PTSD, you're gonna have all these negative effects that happen in wartime anyway. And now they've gone through and they've done all this destruction and killing, and the war ended like a month ago,
Well,
and
and
none
you
of it
go
had
back
to
in time a
happen.
little bit to pre-Revolutionary War. That was a big deal too, because like England would declare war on France or vice versa, and we ended up fighting about it here in the colonies. But because it took 30 days for any messages to come across the pond, there were battles that happened in the United States before it was the United States, obviously, that ended up being completely unimportant. Guys would go and they would see their friends get killed, and they would take this hill or whatever, and they'd return from the battle, only to find out that, well, England and France had made peace and they gave that hill to the enemy.
Yeah, for sure.
And
100%.
and that was part of what led to the Revolutionary War. Was the colonies were sick and tired of fighting a war for people only just to get thrown under the bus, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah. Communication.
When we were talking about rules of engagement and how they might go out the window, now that I think that as far as you were talking about micromanagement and things like that, I think as far as efficiently prosecuting a war, it's almost better if our rules of engagement, if the captains and the commanders are far away from talking to their home world, because they probably have a better idea of how to prosecute the war than the people back home would.
But I think
they give
Yeah,
a
for
little bit of
sure.
the leeway.
ROE is a luxury ultimately. Like, what is the war an existential threat to your existence as a country? We'd
Does the
like to
enemy
think,
have ROE?
yeah, we'd like to think
Right?
that we're moral and that we are executing, combat in a moral way. But then there's that, human thing that takes over, and you just want to kill everybody that is trying to hurt you. ROE is that's one of those things. I don't know. I love to read different debates about it. I know it sounds super dry, but it creates, like, it's a desire to do things in the right way. But what is the right way ultimately? And is this? I mean, that's kind of something when you have like say a character like Jacob that Jeffrey has developed, who is a moral character and wants to do the right thing and is somebody you can root for, but you put them in a situation that is potentially immoral, or it has a potential for collateral damage and things like that. Like, that's, again, that's something you can really make the reader feel or see or understand, that things are never cut and dry. And anybody tries to tell you that a war is, cut and dry or easy, or, combat's going to be easy, it's just, that's not what this is about.
People who haven't seen it
Right.
or read about it.
It's a
or many
simplistic.
Well,
that
and
have been in it.
it's funny too how, you know, I think rules of engagement are in general terms good things, but on top of their like black and white applications is a gray area, right? Where you're talking
Right.
about moral, right? But you're talking like simplistic, you know, the idea of I didn't punch him first, so that makes me better,
Right.
right? And so like,
I
you
didn't
know,
start the fight. Yeah.
I didn't start the fight, right? So like you go into I see this more on just a kind of a person to person level, but you go into a situation where there's two sides and they're both chipping their teeth at each other and none of them want to throw the first punch because both of them want to be right. Right. I was just defending myself. And so he threw the first punch. And then a lot of people get kind of hooked up on the fact that I can't throw the first punch because if I throw the first punch, then I'm not moral or I'm not right.
You don't have the high
And
ground.
I don't have the high ground. And I've seen a lot of kind of confrontations that me personally, like you see this people getting in each other's faces and they're like this and they're like spits flying and but because they're not punching, they're right. And I'm like, that guy's in my personal space. I'm not going to let him stand in my personal space and yell at me. He's going to get decked and laid out. And that doesn't make me wrong. And so like a lot of times you have that
You just have
kind
to
of
sort of define where the conflict begins.
well, you
Right,
have to.
because-
This is why police officers get tased, so they can articulate why they did a thing because they know what the taser does, and so that
Yeah.
if you know, so I can articulate that if someone's into my space, I can say he's a threat to me because I don't know what he's going to do, so I'm going to lay him out.
When they're that
That's
close,
my
they're a
articulation.
threat.
That they're a threat. They're in my personal space. They're presenting a threat to me. I can articulate that. I'm cool with that. A lot of people don't think about that reasoning when they go into a conflict, but you know, when you talk about rules of engagement, those can be interpreted or extrapolated in a certain way where people are like, well, he was holding his gun up but he wasn't firing at me, right? But is he still presenting a threat? Like some of those rules
I
of
think-
engagement where you don't fire until you get
neutralize it.
fired upon, like
Right.
that could be like a handicap factor in a lot of situations because you know, maybe you see 10 guys and they're not shooting at you, so you can't shoot at them. But then behind those 10 guys, there's 1,000 guys coming. And if you would have engaged those 10 guys, those 1,000 guys you might have prevented them from massing and attacking you. And now you guys are in a bad spot, right? So,
And then you
you
got
know,
people who use the ROE to try to articulate things like when your ROE is 10 things long, it's like, no,
Mhm.
no, ROE has got to be
Well, I
simple.
think you brought up a good point before, Jeff, was does the enemy have an ROE?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to affect yours. Like, for instance, in the war that's in the Drop Trooper books and in a few of the others, the enemy, they have no compulsion or no affection for us, and they will be willing to kill us, including our civilians, in a heartbeat. But they keep the civilians around once they've taken the planets that they consider theirs, because they know that if they keep our civilians there, we won't nuke
Bomb
the
them.
cities they're in. We won't drop, you know, we won't drop kinetic weapons on their cities and just destroy them outright.
Which kind of
So
tells you
the-
who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, to be honest.
So that when the time comes in those books, when we invade their planets, politically, we feel compelled to not just, bomb
Not
the
a
crap
war
out
of
of them and
extinction.
slaughter
Right.
their civilians,
Yeah.
not just because we feel like we're morally superior, but because they didn't do it to ours. And it kind of created, just like nobody used chemical weapons in World War II.
Because of what happened in World War One.
Yeah, but yeah, they don't, they feel like there's lines. If you cross the lines, then the other side's going to cross the line too. So they
Well, I
try
mean-
to take populations as intact as possible.
I know it's a superhero movie, but Batman Begins at the end of the movie, Commissioner Gordon's telling Batman, like, we wear bulletproof vests, they buy armor-piercing rounds. You wear a costume, now there's this guy. And it's an escalation, right? And the goal should always be to de-escalate as much as possible, because ultimately the ultimate escalation is, I'm going to go to the asteroid belt. I'm going to wrap this asteroid up to about 0.5 C, and that's the end of the war.
right.
And I just don't care anymore. So yeah, I mean, that you're right. The point should be to keep it from escalating to the point of like, well, now we're just genociding every planet we come across because we're tired of fighting.
Right.
And I feel like part of what happened in World War II, which is tough to agree or disagree on, is Patton and what's his face, the corn cob pipe guy,
MacArthur.
That
MacArthur,
was MacArthur. Yeah, you're right.
wanted to keep fighting Russia. And part of me feels like if we had, the Cold War wouldn't have happened. We would have taken all of Germany. There would have been no Cold War, and that would have been it. But also, people were tired of the war, so you know
Right.
you got
Which is
balance that you have to have.
Another thing to think about, like what is
Yeah,
the,
absolutely.
you know,
Which is
so-
why it's so important if you write military sci-fi to read history
yes,
and to read other military sci-fi, especially the great works like Starship Trooper, Josh.
Yeah. Man.
I will buy it for you if you want.
you
I
should.
will call
I'm
you,
sure.
read it to
I
you.
am sure that I have it. I am sure that I either have it on ebook or audio. I can't remember who I was having this discussion with, but there's so many good books now that I just read those and I don't read
They're all
any
based
of the
on that
classics.
one, though. That's the
Oh, I
thing.
get it. But
It's
I
also
don't
not
need to
that
read.
long.
It's not
Very
that long.
short.
It's very different than you expect too. I would almost call it an
It's not at all like the
anti-.
movie. So don't get the movie out of your head when you're going to read
Yeah,
it.
it's totally
But-
different.
Oh no, I know. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then on that bombshell that one of us has not read the greatest military science fiction of all time, we should probably wrap it up for the day.
All right. So let us know what you think about like how you would attack a planet. But as we've kind of shown, this is a big subject. So it's one of those things where it's just interesting to see, like I'm interested to see that somebody has thought it through. Like that's what really entices me about this kind of story. So all right. Well, thank you very
Yeah, let
much.
us know on Discord. Tell us your
Yeah.
plan. You know, lay it all out, detail it, add some characters. Let us
Tell us how you would invade Earth.
give us that
Yes.
information so we can put it in our next book.
I know, so we can steal it. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time. Later.
Adios.
Troopers fall through an endless sky. Military sound and science fiction contest. We entered the system on fire. Military sound and science fiction contest. Short stories every Wednesday. Military sound and fiction podcast.